Hi, everyone. Hi, Sama. So let's get started. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight. So I'm Stéphanie Bodac. I'm leading the French-American Chamber of Commerce here in Chicago. So for those who don't know us yet, but I see lots of familiar faces, so it's good. So we are a go-to business network for individual and corporate operating internationally. And we are a non-profit, independent, member-driven organization. And what we do mainly is organizing networking events like this one tonight, and also providing services to our members. So it could be helping them in business development, in human capital, in hosting. So the message here is whatever your question, feel free to ask, because we have many ways to help you as individuals and as corporates. So happy to help the community. And so tonight I'm delighted to introduce the Food Club. This is one which is quite dear to my heart because I've been spending like 20 years in the food business. So I'm always fascinated by this industry. We are lucky to have two amazing co-chairs for this club. So Marc Panvier, VP of Operation at Dell, and Clément Talleux, who is in charge of transformation and integration at Ferrara. And tonight we are also really happy to have three talented experts in their respective areas. So we have the insight, we have the nutrition, we have the regulatory. So we thought it would be nice to have them come together to tell a kind of nice story about decoding the food trends across the US and France, because what we try to do, there are so many things happening on the Chicago scene in terms of, conferences and show, that the edge we want to keep is really always talking about the cultural differences and the something we experience, all of us operating internationally. So the angle of tonight is also about understanding the commonalities and the differences between the US and France when it comes to food and trends and regulatory. So thank you to Thibaut as well for hosting us at Taft. It's always a pleasure to have such beautiful rooms to discuss. So I will let our speakers present themselves in more detail, and then Lucile will kick off with the key insights and human truths behind the food. So thank you so much, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lucile Agaisse, and I, as Stephanie was mentioning, I work in consumer insights. In particular, I work a lot with French companies who want to understand American consumers. And a topic, something that's really dear to my heart is helping French people understand American consumers so that they really understand the deep truths that lead to the American consumers' behaviors. And tonight, actually, this is what I'm going to share. We'll go deep into the cultural elements that shape our relationship to food in the US and in France. So I'm excited. I can't wait.
Hi everyone, I'm Marianne Clément Talleux. I'm French food engineer and dietitian nutritionist. I bridge two worlds. I work directly with patients. I'm specialized especially in obesity, GLP-1, and pediatrics as well. And I consult for food and pharma industries in product innovation, nutrition strategies, and so on. And I'm happy to be here with you.
Hi, everyone. I am the Director of Regulatory and Specifications at Ferrara, and my name is Meera Simha. I have been working in Ferrara for about 3 years, but I have over 15 years of experience in the regulatory field. So I'm very passionate about it. Hopefully you'll see that when I speak, but I'm really passionate about, regulatory, how different countries, put across their, regulations and how they're telling people and companies how to operate. So it's very fascinating for me to see the differences between different countries and how challenging it can be. So I hope to give you a little snippet of, from the angle of a CPG company, some of the challenges that we face when we go from trying to be small to be big. So excited to be here, and thank you.
Just as a note, I didn't want to make it as interactive as possible. It's all about also sharing experience and best practices. So we have a talk, but it's also awesome.
Okay, so let's start by uncovering the cultural truths that shape our relationship to food. All right. So first, we will talk about culture. Then we'll see how these cultural elements shape our relationship to food. And this will also help us understand if there's actually true change coming up in the US. And we believe there is for reasons that you will discover during this presentation. So we're going to kick off our understanding of, what the cultural elements that shape the relationship to food by watching a video. It's a video from a movie. It's actually a classic cult comedy in the US. It's called Talladega Nights. Yeah, some of you are nodding. So Talladega Nights is actually a French Formula One driver, Jean Girard, talking with his nemesis, Ricky Bobby, a NASCAR driver. And it's really funny, actually, what this comedy tells us about our two cultures.
I am French. You say you're French? We're American, because you're in America, okay? Greatest country on the planet. Really, smarty pants, what did French land give us?
We invented democracy, existentialism, and the ménage à trois.
Okay. Is that accurate? Yeah, feels accurate? Yeah, it is pretty spot on. So when we look at the value systems, like really key value systems in both cultures, what do we notice? In the US is about pragmatism and productivity. Self-reliance, individualism is also the country of the free market. I mean, all these elements are rooted in the history of the country, right? It was a country created from scratch by pioneers, and it's a bastion of the free market. On the other hand, in France, intellectualism is very strong, and hedonism. Okay, we're a country that values, the fact of being cultured, of thinking, and cultivating pleasure. Collectiveness is also important, and the two go hand in hand. Collectiveness and governmental and institutional support are very strong, and governmental regulation of the economy as well, right? French society actually was shaped by the aristocratic culture and the absolute monarchy. Makes sense, right? We had the aristocrats, and the king provided for the people, and this is still really strong in our culture, in the way we think. And aristocrats were very cultured and intellectuals. The two quotes are pretty interesting to read, right? Theodore Roosevelt that said, "Far and away, the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing." I'm going to translate the French quote by our French philosopher, very famous French philosopher, Jean-Paul Sartre. "Seul l'amour et l'art rendent l'existence tolérable." So only art and love make life bearable. So I think it's a really good, we can really feel the two cultures here. So when we look at the relationship to food, we will see that these elements, these key elements of the value systems, actually shape our relationship to food in both countries, both cultures. There's a big rift in the the role of pleasure, in the place of pleasure, in the relationship to food in both cultures. In the US, pleasure, I mean, of course, Americans seek pleasure, but pleasure is considered a kind of animal, it's still an animal impulse. You give into that impulse if you want to, or you control it. This is a quote from an author specialized actually in talking about and in thinking about the relationship to food, Virginia Soul-Smith. We feel especially compelled to apologize for enjoying food, for wanting seconds, for appearing to eat even a single bite more than we think we should. In France, the situation is very, very different. Pleasure is like a key component of human happiness and a collective right in a way. And the picture that we have here is the declaration of the hedonist rights, basically. And here there's a quote by a French, actually he was a lawyer, but also a foodie, a very well-known foodie from the 18th century, Brillat-Savarin, who's saying that the pleasure of eating, it's something that's like for everyone, everywhere, in every country and every day. Very, very strong right for that, is everyone's right. So, of course, pleasure is at the heart of the relationship to food in France. Gustative pleasure, so a pleasure that's in France considered a refined pleasure. Like there's something intellectual about it. It's considered elevated. It's guilt-free because it's very far away from the animal impulse. It's so intellectualized and refined. And it's also there's also the belief that if it tastes good, it's good for me. It cannot be bad. Eating is also a social pleasure, and we'll talk about it a little later, but yeah, company is essential also to the experience of eating. And it's a pleasure that's visual and ritual. It engages the senses beyond just the fact of tasting. So it's a really multifaceted and sophisticated pleasure, and the French are very proud of this pleasure that they have when they eat. And let's see what Jean Girard tells us about it.
I will let you go, Ricky. But first, I want you to say, I love crepes. Don't you?
I'm from Brittany, the region of crepes, so I'm a little, biased. But he's, he wants to convert Ricky Bobby to the French gustative experience. And you can see how proud he is of the crepes. In the US, the relationship is driven by functionality, because what's the goal? When we eat as an American, we eat to be productive. Okay, we always have productivity in mind. We're a country where we want to be in good shape. We want to have the energy to perform. So the approach to food is control-based. I mean, you eat to fuel your body. You eat to fuel your mind, to be productive. Food is work. I have here an example that, French people are always surprised when they go to an American restaurant for the first time, when the waiter comes and says, are you still working on it? And we start looking at, what am I working on? Do I have my computer here? Or, where? And no, they're talking about your plate. And it doesn't make sense for French people. But for Americans, yeah, food is work. I mean, it's the way you make your body work. It's the way you make your mind work. It's the way you ensure you have enough energy to be productive. And yeah, that's a little thing of the belief that exercise can compensate for unhealthy eating. When Stephanie goes to the gym and she's being asked if she needs to compensate for like binging, on burgers or whatever, during the weekend, or margaritas. I heard, yeah, margaritas. So there's this belief that you control everything that goes into your body, and you can control the way it's metabolized as well if you exercise. The approach to food, and Marianne will tell us more about it, but it's really a fragmented approach, targeted approach to food. Like foods are reduced to specific functions in a problem solution logic. So we bring our body the supplement that is missing. We're going to eat the superfood because it's going to do everything we need. It's going to make us super energetic. It's going to make us super healthy. Same thing when there's the rejection of carbs or valorization of protein. It's the same thing. We need this nutrient, this specific food. And pleasure, as we saw earlier, that's this animal impulse aspect to pleasure. So Americans do indulge in pleasure, but it's in a way that's like we indulge, basically. Yeah, indulging like we indulge a child. And it's a pleasure that we call regressive because it's typically associated with comfort foods that are typically things that children like as well. So it's a pleasure that's very comforting, entertaining, fun. So it can be derived from quantity. Binging is a pleasure. It can be derived from like this soft texture that remind of the foods that baby like. It can be derived from flavors that are really entertaining or strong or crunchy textures that are fun. And it's typically also guilty pleasure, this type of pleasure. So it's definitely a relationship that tends to create a tug of war between discipline and indulgence. Not easy to be an American when it comes to food, right? Went a little too far. So the second major difference in the relationship to food in France and in the US is the place of collectiveness as opposed to individual in the relationship, right? So in the US, it's the individual's responsibility. What you eat is your responsibility. And typically you will eat alone. Not always, but much more than in France. So quick and light meals, and so quick that you're hungry about 2 hours later, right? And then there's a need for snacking. That's why nearly half of the food intake comes from snacking. And typically individual food choices. It's not rare in a family, at a family dinner, that everyone eats something different. So individual choices. Little nutritional awareness. There's a great variability across individuals. Not everybody has the same level of nutritional awareness. And the institutional standards, because we're in a free market, and it's the market that sets the standards and the regulations. And Meera will talk about it much more in depth later. But this example of the pizza that was ruled a tomato vegetable, right, by Congress in 2011. In France, it wouldn't happen. It's very different logic. And there's also little culinary expertise, even though it's changing. But for a long time, it's not been easy for Americans to make, to cook at home things that everybody would like and enjoy. In France, the tradition is much more collective. So we eat together, okay, shared meals. They're going to be long, multi-course meals that make you full, and then you're not going to need to snack for a long time after that. And they're also safeguard against poor dietary habit because of the peer pressure. Even if you're craving a food, when you're in company of your friends or family, you're not going to eat that food in front of them. So you just don't eat it. A strong nutritional education in France. There's a nutritional tradition that's been passed along through the generations. Eat lots of vegetables and fruit, and this is something that's been passed along with actually the culinary expertise that makes it possible to eat these healthy foods because you can make them tasty for everyone. And the institutions also help with the nutritional education. Your doctor, gives you advice, your pediatrician gives you advice. The government, puts out campaigns to tell you to eat 5 to 10 vegetables a day, and so it's everywhere. It's really pervasive and really easy in France to get nutritional education and to be nutritionally aware. So let's see what these guys tell us now.
Well, what have you given the world apart from George Bush, Cheerios, and the Fry Master?
Chinese food,
Chinese food,
that's from China. Pizza,
Italy, chimichanga, Mexican.
Yeah. So the culinary tradition in the U.S., it's harder to cook something that you like at home when you don't have a strong culinary tradition. Okay, so when things get interesting, when we start thinking about, basically in America, the goal is to eat to be productive, but why does it end up, why can people end up eating unhealthily if what they want is to eat well to be productive? Why? Okay, next slide. Okay, the thing is that being productive means being physically healthy and being mentally healthy. And the way you achieve these two goals, leads you on different paths that actually are contradict each other. So when you want to eat for physical health, you need to have a healthy body full of energy, never tired, never sick, etc. And the solution is to eat foods that have valued nutrients, foods that are whole foods, foods that are maybe considered superfoods. And typically, if you're not a super good, you don't have a culinary tradition, they're not going to taste super good. So it's a real discipline, and it's not much pleasure. And then pleasure is essential to your mental health. So you have to eat for your mental health as well. And what are you going to eat for your mental health? If you cannot cook, easily things that are going to be pleasurable, but you're going to turn, and also if you're hungry because you've had a light meal and you need to snack 2 hours after the meal, what are you going to eat? What are you going to eat? Comfort foods. Yeah, you're going to eat comfort foods. And because, it helps you manage stress and anxiety. It helps you be productive. So they can be the reassuring, you're going to sweet taste, creamy texture, brings you back to your childhood baby food memories, right? It's reassuring. Can be stimulating, just going to find a crunchy texture to wake you up. Like a Takis Fuego, I don't recommend personally, but my son loves them. So Takis Fuego wakes up my son, definitely. So this is what you're going to use if you want to be stimulated. But of course, it's not healthy for your body, right? So this is where, I think many times when we think of American relationship to food, we completely underestimate the desire that Americans have to eat healthy and to do well. They really want to be productive and do what's right, but then they don't necessarily have the tools to do what they want. And what's happening today? We're observing 3 major changes that could actually be game changers in their relationship to food. So these 3 factors are happening more or less simultaneously. So there's a growing nutritional awareness. Marianne will tell you more about it. There's a lot of information out there, and the accuracy is really, not necessarily, there's a problem of accuracy, but there's a lot of information out there on social media. Now we have the government also who's, dabbing a little bit into this as well. The fact that carbs have been rejected and proteins are so overvalorized, it shows that with nutritional awareness, Americans actually really try to do well, right? Also, the defiance of specific ingredients that are deemed toxic, seed oils, again, problems of misinformation, but seed oils, rejection of processed foods, also looking for minimal foods with minimal ingredients, rejecting specific ingredients, etc. So this is, and Marianne will talk more about it. So growing nutritional awareness, rediscovery of cooking. So it's actually basically started during COVID. And it was like it kind of jump-started the Americans. They didn't know, there was this lack of tradition that we have. We have this tradition in France. Our moms tell us how to cook. In the US, it's not that easy when you don't have a mom who can, pass on your grandmother's recipes to you. But during COVID, they learned thanks actually partially to social media that give you easy recipes. So they learned easy recipes, and they're cooking much more at home. All the more than inflation makes it more expensive to eat in restaurants. But there's really also this desire to eat healthy that fuels these new change in behavior, this cooking, newly discovered cooking behavior. And last but not least, the GLP-1 revolution. Because what GLP-1s do is that they help reduce the cravings that you have for unhealthy comfort foods. So you couldn't resist before, now you can. So the motivation to use food to support productivity is a powerful driver for change. And it's really, now that we see that these three factors are converging to, create a new context for Americans, will there be real shifts in American eating behaviors in the future? And I think I can pass the baton to our nutrition expert, who will have much more to tell you about this topic. Thank you. All questions now? Yeah. Yes, we can do a few questions now before when she's warming up. Yeah. Sure. Yes. The rejection of carbs. Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember when we moved to 20 years ago with my husband Sebastian, right over there. So, so that's where I remember it was charting, and I think Michelle Obama, they did a campaign also and she hammered the message, and that was right about when we moved. So there suddenly people realized that sugar was not healthy. And I remember that the soda market went down, and that was a big and people turned to water. I mean, I could literally see in my HEB, a supermarket, the soda aisle shrinking and the water aisle expanding and expanding. So they learned sugar was bad, and they implemented a change in their behavior. Yes. I think Marianne has the answer for you. Thank you. Okay.
So I want to start with something personal with this beautiful AI. Sorry. Oh, okay. I switch. Okay, sorry for this beautiful AI generated image, but I assure you it will be the last one like that. So I want to start with something personal. When I moved to Chicago last year, two things struck me. The first was what I would call the democratization of nutritional language. Back in France, people say I'm eating protein. Here in the US, people say I'm eating, back in France, people say I'm eating chicken. And in the US, people say I'm eating protein. So in the US, we don't eat food, we eat macros, we eat carbs, we eat proteins, we eat fibers. In the US, we lose sight of food as a whole. Sure, in France, I occasionally saw patients tracking their protein intake, but it was more a small sports-oriented crowd. The second thing I noticed, and I've seen that in France too, but never at this scale, it's what I would call binary food culture. So the idea that food is divided into two camps, with the food that are forbidden, the bad food, and food that are allowed and even mandatory, the good food. So both of these trends add a cognitive layer to something this is fundamentally natural, our ability to regulate how much we eat and what we eat based on our internal sensations. And if we take that logic further, sorry, is here. Yeah. There are good nutrients and bad nutrients. And from that, two winners emerge, fiber and protein, and a little bit of healthy fat on the side. But protein and fiber are the silver bullets. What I find fascinating and a bit concerning as a nutritionist, to be honest, is the anxiety this creates around eating, almost a drift towards nutritional perfectionism, where eating well means eating the right nutrients in the right quantities. And where what matters is not the food itself, but only its nutritional profile, regardless of what's actually in the plate or in the product. So take this protein drink as an example. We don't know what it is, which food it is, but the only thing we know is it has protein. So once again, disconnected to the food as a whole. Now, if we focus on protein, it gets an interesting paradox. This obsession with protein is actually backfiring in two ways. First, Americans already consume more protein than they actually need. The average American already overshoot protein recommendation by more than 50%, and more than 2/3 say that they are still trying to eat more. But there is no documented health benefits to eating beyond the requirements. And for people with pre-existing kidney conditions, this can make things worse. So this is not even justified by the science. Second, consumers tend to turn to ultra-processed food. I will say UPF to make it simple. So they tend to turn to UPF to increase their protein intake. So the messaging has become so complex and so contradictory that consumers are confused, and they no longer know what to classify as good or as bad. And take this Pop-Tart right here, and I have a question for you. Should you buy it because the pack screams protein, or should you not buy it because it's a UPF loaded with sugar and additives? I let you choose. So alongside all of this, there's actually a counter movement building. I call it the real food revival. And it's interesting because it lives with the same good versus bad logic. It's just the other side of it. So people want to reject the processed and go back to raw and real ingredients. And perhaps this is ultimately a response of that complexity we've reached, as if because of that complexity, people may crave simplicity again. So the UPF conversation is becoming increasingly present now. If you look at Google Trends, searches for ultra-processed have increased sharply over the 5 past years. So we now have books, documentaries, Instagram accounts with millions of followers. And what is interesting here, it's Gen Z, because Gen Z is leading the charge in a really notable way. And compared with older generations, Gen Z consumers are far more attentive to ingredient lists before buying. So studies show that 64% of Gen Z consumers seek foods with clean ingredients. So that means more natural, minimally processed, and free from artificial additives. So they want to know what's in their food, and if they don't like it, they will put it back. Mm-hmm. I made a mistake, maybe. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. So on the flip side of all this rejection of UPF, there's a growing intention to cook more, as Lucile said. But here is the tension. People want to cook, but they don't actually have the time for that. So cooking from scratch is still perceived as a barrier, as an effort. So what's emerging is a really interesting middle ground, not fully processed, not fully homemade, so something in between. I like to call it the home kitchen heroes. So it's the semi-homemade solution that make you feel like you cooked without the full-time commitment. So think pre-prepped food, pre-prepped proteins, meal starters, and fresh ingredients delivered to your door. And the market is responding. If we look at the US meal kit delivery space, they hit now $15 billion in 2025, and it's projected to nearly double by 2033. So that's a real shift in how Americans think about cooking. And this is not just consumer movement anymore, because the institutions are starting to catch up. For the first time, the US dietary guidelines are explicitly recommending fewer UPF and more whole, minimally processed ones. So it gets a legitimacy to that, which will probably amplify the conversation going forward. And tools like Yuka are perfectly positioned for this moment. And honestly, part of why they work so well is that they surf exactly on that binary logic I talked about earlier, with a green, orange, red rate in a fun app experience. So Yuka is French, started in France. But now the US is their #1 market ahead of France. And so that tells us a lot about how hungry Americans are for this kind of transparency. And now just a nuance worth noting. The current user base SKUs, pretty specific. For now, it's still largely a tool for an educated and health engaged segment of the population. But we can imagine that this kind of initiative will grow and become mainstream in the future. Now, on top of all of this, there's one more force that's accelerating everything, and we really can't talk about US food trends without addressing it. It's the GLP-1 effect. So prescription for obesity are skyrocketing. We are talking about more than 10 million Americans currently on these drugs, and even more, according to some studies, with a projection reaching over 40 million American by 2035. So that's around 15% of the US population. So that's just enormous. And to put that in perspective, in France for obesity specifically, we are talking about a few thousand patients with no official figure available yet, and less than 1 million if we consider patients living with diabetes. So we are looking at two completely different realities. So in the US, GLP-1 have become a mainstream phenomenon, and that has implication for how people eat, what they buy, and what they expect from food products. So that's what I want to get into next, and this will be my last slide. So when we look at patients' eating behavior, we see a significant shift. On average, people reduce their total calorie intake by around 30%. So someone who used to consume around 3,000 calories a day may now be closer to 2,000 calories. So that's really, really huge. One of the key changes is what we call food noise reduction. So food noise is that constant unwanted thoughts about eating that interfere with daily life. And with the GLP-1s, this quiets down significantly. So as a result, we observe that patients taking GLP-1s drugs don't think about food all the time anymore, making it easier for them to snack less and have more structured meals with more fresh produce. And one study found that spending on savory snacks, cookies, and baked goods dropped by about 10% within 6 months of starting treatment. And because people are eating less, what they eat starts to matter more. So there's a clear shift toward prioritizing protein, not necessarily eating more of it, but making sure it's consistently present on the plate to help preserve muscle mass during the weight loss. With more fresh produce, high in protein like chicken and yogurt. So the shift is less quantity and better quality. And this has major implication for the industry because I saw a data that suggests that GLP-1 adoption could reduce food and beverage industry revenues by 30 to 55 billion dollars per year by 2030, 2034. So to conclude, this is a structural reshaping of eating behavior that the industry will likely need to adapt to.
question about GLP-1. I know the benefits. What I do observe is that more and more people, as you said, but not only people who suffer from obesity, right? You also have people who do not have that facial issues who goes on GLP-1. They get the benefit. I also heard some negative effects on the body, and things that can impact longer term. What do you think as nutritionists about GLP-1?
For people who take GLP-1s and who are not living with obesity, it's not a normal way to use it because it's only a load for and normally you can't get if you are not living with obesity, or you are closer to close to, but and you have some comorbidities or something, complications about you. So that's why that's the first point. The second point, I think GLP-1 drugs are really efficient. It's the best solution we have to treat obesity, but I mean obesity like as a chronic disease, because it's a chronic disease. So like you would have drugs to treat your diabetes or hypercholesterolemia. We now have a solution to treat obesity as a chronic disease. But there are two main points. The first thing is, if you want to take GLP-1 just to lose a few pounds for summer, for the summer body, it's not a good way to use it. And it's not a short time treatment because it's a chronic disease. And the second point is you can't do it by your own. Just alone at home. You take your medication during a few months and that's it. It's not the best way again. So you need to be accompanied, and you need to have a multidisciplinary approach, because what's the most interesting thing with GLP-1 is food noise reduction, and because people don't have this constant thinking about food, and even about everything. Like we know that it's really efficient for addiction, alcohol addiction, drug addictions, and also eating disorders. So they reduce all the thinking that interfere with daily life. And because we don't have that anymore, we can work deeply on the behavior, on the behavior change, the physical activity, the mindset, the stress management. So patients need to be accompanied with different experts, and not just doing by themselves.
Thank you, Marianne. That's fascinating. Thank you, Lucile, as well. I just have a question. I mean, for everyone who's here, when you watch TV or anything, it's always of food and then healthcare. So you have eat bad food, and then you have a meditation that helps. Now, I think for the first time we have the GLP-1 that's before, and it's going to change. It's changing the habits of the consumer. So, and I think doing some work on it. How are companies or food companies reacting to that? Because in 5 years from now, they're gonna have to innovate, to be able to keep selling their so what are the trends? What are you saying?
Food industries look at it very, very carefully right now. There are a lot of things, but I think we can brainstorm during hours on it. I think we need to think healthy, small, and dense. So yeah, that's the 3 points to adapt the food industry for the future.
I have a question. So obviously GLP-1s are kind of new in the market, right? It's been like a couple of years. Do we have data yet on people that have completed their treatments? Is the food noise back? How is their serving size? Like, how's the eating habit?
Yeah. Yeah. If we stop the treatment, we have food noise come back, appetite come back. Yeah, for sure. The thing is, it's the same as I said earlier. If you take it for a short period, you will gain weight again because appetite come back and so on. But it's patients need to take it for a long enough period of time to be able to work deeply on their behaviors and so on. And what we see, but there is no a lot of data, long-term data, I mean, on it. But what we see is if people, and the recommendations in France is to take it at least 2 to 3 years. There is 1 year to lose weight, and then we stabilize. We stabilize during the treatment, and after we stabilize when we stop the treatment. So we need to adjust every time. And what we see from a clinical experience now, and not that much from long-term data, unfortunately, that there is a new equilibrium, a new set point that is settling up when you take it for a long time. So you don't need to struggle anymore with all the food noise and so on, because you have time to work on it before, and the body adapts itself as well. Yeah, psychologists for physical activity also, so coaches or and sometimes for addiction, sometimes for eating disorders. Yeah, it's really a multidisciplinary approach. Yeah, to make it sustainable. I mean.
C'est pas si ma grosse voix là. Tu crois? Bon. Couple of questions. So at the beginning of the presentation, so thank you for the presentation first. At the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that there was that in the US, people were consuming 50 to 80% more protein than needed.
Mm-hmm.
And on the last slide, we see that so there is a reduction after taking GLP-1 of total calorie intake, but there is still a protein focus. So the question that I have is, where is that coming from?
It's really to preserve the muscle mass during weight loss, because the weight loss is really rapid.
Okay.
So if we don't focus on the most important nutrients, we can be undernutrited.
Undernourished.
Undernourished. So yeah, the most important thing is to prioritize protein and also fiber, but it's more to prevent the side effects.
Okay. And the follow-up question that I had was, I mean, I had a question about yucca before even you showed the slide. So it was really, really interesting. You highlighted that let's say the the cooking habits changed mainly during COVID because people were more at home and remote.
Yeah.
Now we've been like a couple of years after COVID and people are being asked to go back to the office. We see it more and more, not only in tech, but also in banking, even in CPG. We are being asked more and more to go back to the office, which means, so the follow-up question is, going back to the office means people have less time to cook. So what I would expect is that, as you showed it earlier, that people would be revert to their bad habits of before. So the question that I have for you is the following. Do you think that at some point, Yuka benefited from like the COVID effect with people staying at home, having more time, starting to cook and being a bit more curious about what they were eating? But at the same time, if there is not some kind of also ripple effect in the sense that, okay, I'm interested into cooking at home. I'm being curious about what I'm cooking. And then when I'm being asked to go back to the office, the availability of that application gives me more incentive to, let's say, not go back to my old habits, being more cautious about what I'm eating at the same time.
Yeah. I don't know.
I can talk about the cooking at home. Actually, it really jump started. I mean, like basically, there were people who did not know how to boil an egg. Okay, so and what I've seen is that Americans who cook now, they make very simple things like salads. You know, if you don't know how to boil an egg, it's hard to make a salad that's gonna have the protein you need actually. So they just learn a few very easy combinations and very easy cooking tricks, and it still works when it doesn't require much time. And the yuca, and I think the yuca actually added to their incentive to cook, but now it's not hard for them to cook anymore. So I think that I would believe that the trend is going to continue.
And I think it's. I would add that yuca is useful also to clean the product, the UPF. So yeah, that's the main trend, I think, for yuca.
Yes, I'm just going to hijack a little bit. It's about your yes, your question about how does the food industry react. So I'm obviously not a spokesperson, but it's just the movement is huge. Probably the US is the country in the world where all those new things happen the fastest. We operate in 120 countries. Nowhere else it moves so fast. So how does the industry react? I don't really know, but just a few examples. First, if the industry has protein in their products, then they put it big on the packaging, or else it doesn't sell. It's just out of the shelf. It doesn't sell. It's brutal. It's brutal. So brutal that some of the big companies are closing factories. If the position is not good, major players in the US, I won't give names, close facilities because the consumption is -15, -20 on some snacks. But then it's booming on other snacks. So the industry is also reacting. Those big players, they focus a lot more on what is healthy. Let me give you an example. So they buy companies basically because it's faster to transform by buying a startup or a company. Let me give you an example. There is a company, Good Culture, they produce cottage cheese, probably the best cottage cheese. They were for sale 4 or 5 years ago. Not too much, small budding company, not very expensive. It's a dairy, so a multiplier of the ×3, ×4. But they realized that they're not a dairy company. They are a healthy snack for the morning. So they just sold in Jan for $500 million, multiplying their with 15, a factor of 15. It's the same company, but they consider and they realize they're a dairy snack, and their sales are booming. So it's moving super fast. I would have other example, but it's also moving because of the big impact of regulation, which is our next topic. So sorry for hijacking.
So Meera, and then yeah, we can keep going.
Hey.
All right, I think that was a great transition because we've had a very good foundation on how consumers react, what they like, and then how products differ across markets. And so I'm going to add an additional layer now to show you what about regulations, because you cannot put a product on the market unless you follow those countries' regulations. So no matter what the consumer wants or what your dietary patterns are, you're really putting a product in the market, you have to listen to what the government says. So really quickly, just to give you an overview of some of the topics that I'll go over, is understanding that link between demand, nutrition, and regulation. So how does that play? And I think a very important question of why products don't translate across markets. Very simple question. You may think it's a simple answer, but it's actually not. And then just a very brief overview between how does the US and EU regulatory systems work. So it's not going to be a technical lesson, very high level. And then just to give you a launch reality, very, what do I say, live example of, what a CPG company might be going through when it comes to launching a product in a different market. And so I will give a case study without revealing too much, but just giving you enough information to understand how difficult or how complex that is. And then just wrapping it up with some other, information that might be useful to you. So. Okay. Am I going backwards? Maybe I'm going backwards. Oop, no. What's going on? I think it's okay, there you go. Okay, so by the way, I like animation, so there'll be a lot of clicks. I might as well just go through all of them and have the information on the slide, but bear with me. So if we just simplify the system, right? So there are really 3 layers that define success in food and nutrition, right? So first, there are consumer expectations, right? So what do people want? And we've heard about that. The second is your nutritional formulation. So what are the products that you're making designed to deliver? But then there is this third layer, which is your regulatory authorization. That very often gets very little attention. Because even if your product meets all of this, it really needs to be allowed into the market. And that's where things start diverging across the Atlantic. So put all of this together, your product can only be on shelf if you follow what the regulations allow you to do. Okay, so then the basic question, why products don't translate, right? So one of the, I think the most common misconceptions is when you're doing an international expansion, that it's very easy to just translate a product into the other market. But in reality, that's not often the case, right? So not because the product is wrong, but just the context is different, right? So we know consumer expectations differ. We also know nutritional positioning differs. So something that may be positioned, to give the same example of a high protein product in the US, may not be allowed in a country like France or Germany or anywhere else, right? So that is very important. But I think for me, speaking as a regulatory professional, most important thing is regulatory constraints differ, right? So I will illustrate this, as I said, with a real example that we're going through at this moment. And so I have this image that I asked AI to create for me. It's just to give you the difference, right? So on the right, you have this product. This man is very happy that he's getting what he wants. It is filled with sugar, it's filled with artificial dyes, it's vibrant and sweet, designed for the US palate and expectations. But that product is banned, it's declined in the EU because you need natural colors, right? For the most part. There are some specific additives that are allowed in the US that are not allowed in the EU. So at the end of the day, this product that this American loves, European lady probably is like, what is this, right? So why is it on the market? So just to give you some context of how it's not just lift and shift. Okay, so often in a CPG company, regulatory strategy is treated more as a compliance step, something that happens very late in the process, right? But in practice, some of the most important business decisions is shaped by regulations. So it influences how products are formulated, how they're positioned, like I mentioned, what claims are on the package, how is your supply chain structured, how long is it going to take for it to hit the market? And so increase, and then of course, cost analysis, right? We can't forget the differing ingredients. What's your packaging like? What's the volume? What's the sales that you anticipate? So increasingly, regulatory decisions need to be made early at the product design stage, not just before launch. So if people think you can just do that, that's really not what happens. But also a key part of this is for an organization, for a food company, it really means cross-functional effort across the business and R&D, because it is really from your concept to commercialization. You have to make sure all of your teams are involved and every function is critical to the success of that product. So then to understand how this is done really at the highest level, sorry, the US and the EU really operate under two different philosophies, right? So we know in the United States, it's the Food and Drug Administration that really is the agency that drives the oversight, right? It is largely risk-based. Products can enter the market based on available evidence with oversight and enforcement that happens after the product entry, right? Companies have more flexibility, but they're also responsible for the compliance of the product. In Europe, it's different. You have EFSA that evaluates the safety and risk of your ingredients. And then you have the European Commission that actually authorizes and regulates its use, right? The framework here is built on precautionary principle, right? So this is the regulation. If in case anyone's interested, they can go look it up. But really what that means is the scientific evaluation is conducted by EFSA, which is your European Food Safety Authority. And if there is uncertainty around a food, the regulators may choose not to authorize it until the safety is established. So that's really the big difference. So many elements like ingredients claims, certain technologies in Europe require authorization before they can be marketed. In the US, it's considered more faster and flexible because you can put a product in the market and then you prove that it's authorized, right? So in simple terms, the US will ask, can you justify the product? In the EU, the question is, has it been authorized? So that's the very high level difference between the two. Okay, so again, moving on to what are some common myths and what is really the reality, right? So this come up very frequently. So the first one, like I alluded to initially, was US, it's loosely regulated. Really, that's not the case. It just enforces your regulation differently, like I mentioned, through post-market action and litigation. So if anyone's following all of the wonderful things the FDA is doing, they have this big agenda to do post-market review of chemicals and its safety and things like that, right? Years and years and years after they've already determined those ingredients are safe to use. So things like that. The second one is EU blocks innovation. That's also not true. It really is just saying, hey, we want you, we need authorization. It's more structure and it's more formal, right? The other one, I think most people, if you've heard of it, it's called GRAS, generally recognized as safe. That's global. Take one ingredient from the US, put it in the EU. No. It doesn't directly translate into the European system. There is no equivalent to GRAS in Europe. So these are some assumptions where companies often run into challenges. And so, that's why it's not really a lift and shift fast launch, as most people would assume. So what does it really take then, right? What do you need to do? So when companies expand internationally, there are many critical checkpoints to determine whether a product can actually launch, right? So the first three, product classification, the second is ingredient authorization, and then claims and labeling. This, as you may imagine, this is very regulatory driven, right? There is a fourth dimension that we don't think about, is really commercial viability and cost. So this is from the lens of a CPG company, right? Because the question then becomes is, can all of this be done in a commercially viable way? Because you may have reformulation, you may have new suppliers, you may have packaging changes. All of these have cost implications, right? So what we then see is when these are considered very late in the game, right? They're addressed too late. It leads to reformulation, delays, increased costs, right? So your customer is like, where's my product? You're like, oh, actually, we need another 8 months to launch because we have to rework the product. So that really increases the cost and complexity. So why does lift and shift fail, right? So I'm going to bring this to life with a real life example, right? So we are preparing for a launch, one of our confectionery products in Europe, right? That product already exists in the US. So as you know, Ferrara makes candy, right? So at the onset, hey, it's candy. Simple transfer, right? You can lift and shift, same product, same positioning. But in reality, that doesn't happen, right? What we have had to do for this is look at, maybe that's what my product will actually look like in the end. Why? Because we've had to look at ingredient compliance, right? Sometimes it has led to reformulation. It could lead to reformulation because all these bright colors actually may not be allowed. Also have to assess claims. We make fancy claims in the US, not always possible to make in the EU. You have to consider translation. You have to consider new labels, right? So all of that adds to the complexity. So if we're talking about a country like France, it's French labeling. France has its own nuances, so not just the overarching EU principle. They will have their own country-specific requirements. Very often, companies don't know that, and they get into trouble, right? So what then looks like a very simple product transfer becomes really a multi-step regulatory and operational process, right? So what that then could potentially lead to is delayed and adapted launch. So the big key takeaway here is regulation not just shapes your label, it also just shapes the product that you want to launch. So something that we're seeing, so I made this slide maybe 2 weeks ago. Since then, I can probably add 5 other things to this, right? Because that's how often things are changing. One of the biggest shifts we're seeing now is that regulation is expanding beyond the product itself, right? It's moving to supply chain traceability. It's moving to sustainability requirements. It's moving to packaging compliance, which is huge in EU. So if you are not aware of that, that can get you into trouble, not just the product, right? So an example is, I'm sure you've all heard of the EU deforestation regulation impacted a lot of companies, right? Because you are, for certain ingredients like chocolate cocoa, you have to trace it back and have evidence of where it comes from, how it's produced, right? This is becoming a very key access consideration, market access for Europe. So it's no longer just a consumer expectation, because I'm sure consumers, think ahead. They're like, oh, we want clean label, we want non-toxic packaging materials, no plastics, no this, no that. But it's also becoming a regulatory requirement now, which is interesting because we think regulations are slow to catch up. But consumer expectations are increasing. So companies really need to address not just the regulatory side, but the consumer needs at the same time. So to kind of bring everything together from today's discussion, we've talked about consumer behavior, we've talked about dietary patterns in nutrition and regulation, right? What becomes clear is that for a successful international expansion, you require alignment across all of these, right? Consumer expectations, they define your demand. Nutrition defines your reformulation. And then the regulation defines your market access. So if we go back to the example that I shared, what looked like a simple product transfer really became a full adaptation across ingredients, formulation, positioning. It's not an exception anymore. It's becoming the reality across systems. So if we think ultimately products fail because of consumer demands changing or nutrition differing, it's really because of regulation that's reshaping what we can actually sell. So I will leave you with this question, thought-provoking, is if regulation shapes what reaches the shelf, who is really driving innovation? Consumers or regulators? So. All right. Thank you for listening.
We are.
Yeah. You can go back to the center. Actually, we're there because we have people remote.
Yeah.
And so the video is just showing them this corner. So, but now for Q&A, if you want to go back to the center.